The audio has been released, and what it reveals about the final 24 hours of Kyle Busch's life changes everything about how this story is being understood. NASCAR announced the death of Kyle Busch on Thursday, May 21, 2026. He was a two-time Cup champion and 41 years old. And now, less than 48 hours after that announcement, the 911 recording that was placed the afternoon before his death has been made public. And what the caller said in those first frantic seconds is the detail that has stopped the entire racing world cold. The call was placed at approximately 5:30 p.m. on Wednesday, May 20, almost exactly 24 hours before his death was announced. The caller requested an ambulance to be sent to the General Motors Technical Center in Concord, North Carolina. A training facility, a simulator, the place where Kyle Busch had been spending his time preparing for the Coca-Cola 600, one of the most prestigious races on the NASCAR calendar, scheduled for that weekend at Charlotte Motor Speedway. He never made it to the grid. The caller said, "I've got an individual that's shortness of breath, very hot, thinks he's going to pass out, and he's producing a little bit of blood, coughing up some blood. Shortness of breath, extremely hot, thinks he's going to pass out, coughing up blood." 4 symptoms, delivered in one sentence, by a caller who was clearly trying to stay composed while describing something that was clearly not composed. When the dispatcher asked if the person was awake, the caller responded, "He is awake, he's awake, he's on the bathroom floor right now." On the bathroom floor, at a professional racing facility, on a Wednesday afternoon, 24 hours before NASCAR announced to the world that the man who had won 2 Cup Series championships, 234 combined NASCAR victories, and a career that had made him simultaneously the most celebrated and the most polarizing driver of his generation, was gone. The caller requested that the ambulances approach the building with sirens off and gave directions on the quickest route. Sirens off. That request, practical, specific, clearly made by someone who had enough presence of mind to think about discretion in the middle of a crisis, tells you that whoever made that call understood the gravity of the situation and understood that Kyle Busch's privacy, in whatever was happening in that building, needed to be protected. According to sources familiar with the situation, Busch was testing at the racing simulator on Wednesday when he became unresponsive and was transported to a hospital in Charlotte. He was testing, doing the work, preparing for a race he was scheduled to run 4 days later, and somewhere between the simulator and the bathroom floor, something went catastrophically wrong inside his body. But wait, let me ask you something. Have you ever been in a situation where the timeline of events, laid out in the cold, factual language of a 911 transcript, revealed something much more terrifying than any written account could? Because that is what this recording does. It takes what could have been described as a medical emergency and makes it viscerally, specifically, undeniably real. A man on a bathroom floor, still awake, still responsive, still fighting, with someone standing over him, scared enough to call 911, composed enough to give directions while the paramedics came. He was fighting in that bathroom. He was awake, and somewhere between that 5:30 p.m. call and the announcement that came the following day, the fight ended. Now let's talk about who Kyle Busch was, because the 911 recording is the story of his final hours, but it is not the story of his life. Kyle Thomas Busch was born on May 2, 1985. He won his last NASCAR race in 2026, the FR8 208 in Atlanta, just weeks before his death. He won a race in 2026, at 41 years old, in what turned out to be the final weeks of his life. He was not declining. He was not winding down. He was winning. He was still the most competitive, most determined, most singularly focused driver on the grid. He was a 2-time NASCAR Cup Series champion. He leaves behind a massive legacy in motorsports. 2 Cup Series championships, 234 combined wins across NASCAR's National Series, the most in the sport's history. The man who divided fans more completely than almost anyone who ever drove a stock car, who was booed at tracks and cheered at tracks, and who never once adjusted his driving style or his personality to make either reaction stop. He was who he was, at full throttle, always. And he was preparing for the Coca-Cola 600, the longest race on the NASCAR calendar, 600 miles, at Charlotte Motor Speedway, in a car that he had been testing all week. The cause of death has not been officially confirmed. No statement from the family or Richard Childress Racing has provided a specific medical diagnosis. The 911 recording tells us what was happening on Wednesday afternoon. It does not tell us what had been happening inside his body before that, for days, for weeks, for however long the underlying condition had been building without announcing itself. The assumption that his medical crisis began gradually has been shattered by the 911 recording, which reveals an extreme and sudden deterioration. Extreme, sudden, on the bathroom floor in a training facility where he was supposed to be preparing to win. That is the new turn the case has taken, because before this recording the public narrative was of a man who became ill and passed away. After this recording, the public narrative is of a man who was fighting for his life in a bathroom at 5:30 p.m. on a Wednesday, who was awake, who was responsive, who was still there, and who was gone by Thursday. The tributes have been pouring in from NASCAR drivers, teams, and fans from the moment the announcement was made on Thursday. His Richard Childress Racing team, his former teams, the rivals who raced against him for decades, the drivers who grew up watching him and then found themselves competing against the legend who had been winning before most of them had a license. They are all saying the same thing, not in the polished language of official tributes, but in the raw, specific language of people who saw him drive, who sat beside him at pre-race meetings, who know exactly what 234 wins across a career actually cost in terms of commitment, sacrifice, and the kind of relentless competitive fire that most people can only observe from a distance. He was the best, and nobody who raced against him ever had any doubt about that. Kyle Busch is survived by his wife Samantha and his children, including his daughter Lennix and son Brexton. Samantha, Brexton, Lennix, a family that traveled every weekend of every season, that knew the track schedule the way most families know the school calendar, that stood in victory lane with him when he won, including just weeks ago in Atlanta. The last victory photograph exists, Samantha beside him, the kids beside him, a family celebrating a win that none of them knew was the last one. That is the image the racing world is holding alongside the 911 transcript, the victory and the bathroom floor, the win and the loss, 24 hours apart, in the same week, in the same Charlotte. Kyle Busch, a two-time Cup champion and one of NASCAR's greatest and fiercest drivers, he was 41 years old. The case has taken a new turn. The audio is now public. The timeline is now clear. And the questions about what was happening inside his body before that Wednesday afternoon, before the simulator, before the bathroom floor, are the questions that his medical team and his family are now living inside. Rest in peace, Kyle Busch. May 2, 1985, May 21, 2026. One of one. Thank you for watching.